The mystery machine rolled slowly through the thick fog that blanketed Prosperity Hills, an exclusive neighborhood where each mansion told stories of wealth accumulated over generations. The air smelled of old money and freshly cut grass from manicured lawns that stretched like green oceans. Velma adjusted her glasses, studying a peculiar newspaper clipping about the abandoned Mirror Mansion, a property that had mysteriously appreciated 500% in value, despite being uninhabited for 3 years. Jinkies. This doesn't make financial sense, Velma muttered, her analytical mind already working through the puzzle. Properties need maintenance and market demand to increase in value. Something's inflating this mansion's worth artificially. Shaggy clutched his stomach as it growled louder than the van's engine. Like, speaking of inflation, Scoob and I could use some food inflation in our bellies. Right, buddy? Scooby-Doo nodded enthusiastically, his tail wagging at the thought of snacks. Rhea, rude, Scooby agreed, drooling at the prospect. Fred turned the wheel as the iron gates of Mirror Mansion loomed ahead, their ornate design reflecting the last rays of sunset. According to the locals, anyone who tries to buy this mansion receives threatening messages from a ghost called the Phantom Investor. He claims the mansion holds the secret to unlimited wealth. Daphne peered out the window, her keen eye catching something unusual. Look at those mirrors covering every window. And is that ... or those stock market symbols carved into the gate? Her fashion sense extended to details others missed, and she'd noticed the gate bore engravings of dollar signs, percentage symbols, and what looked like financial charts. The mansion itself seemed to breathe with an eerie life. Mirrors covered not just the windows, but portions of the exterior walls, creating a disorienting kaleidoscope effect. The sound of wind chimes shaped like coins clinked ominously in the breeze, creating a melody that sounded almost like cash registers opening and closing. The scent of old paper and dust mixed with something metallic, like pennies left in the rain. Guys, I know we're here to solve a mystery, Velma said, pulling out her tablet. But this is also a perfect lesson in investment fundamentals. Real wealth isn't built on secrets or shortcuts. It's built on understanding value, making informed decisions, and avoiding scams that promise quick riches. Thunder cracked across the darkening sky as the Mystery Machine-S headlights illuminated a sign swinging from rusty chains. Mirror Mansion, where your fortune reflects back at you. Below it, in smaller, weathered letters, beware the compound interest of greed. The gang stepped out of the Mystery Machine into the crisp evening air. Dead leaves crunched beneath their feet, and the mansion loomed before them like a monument to forgotten opulence. Its Victorian architecture spoke of an era when robber barons built their fortunes, but the mirrors covering every surface gave it an unsettling modern twist. Each mirror seemed to watch them, multiplying their reflections into an army of investigators. Like, man, why does every mystery have to involve creepy old houses? Shaggy complained, his knees already knocking together. Why can't we investigate a haunted pizzeria or a ghost-infested all-you-can-eat buffet? Scooby nodded vigorously. Rhea, rough it. Fred pulled out his flashlight and a folder of documents. According to the real estate agent who contacted us, the original owner, Cornelius Goldworth, was a financial genius who made his fortune through something he called reflection investments. He disappeared 20 years ago, and ever since, anyone who tries to purchase or even appraise this property gets scared away by the Phantom Investor. Velma was already taking notes on her tablet. Reflection investments. That's not a recognized financial term. It sounds like either a legitimate strategy he invented, or more likely, a cover for something less ethical. She looked up at the mansion's mirrors. You know, there's an important economic principle here. Transparency. Legitimate investments are transparent. You can see where your money goes. When someone promises secret formulas or hidden paths to wealth, that's usually a red flag for fraud. Daphne approached the front door, her hand trailing along the mirrored wall. These mirrors are expensive, high quality, probably custom made. Someone's investing significant money in maintaining this property's appearance, even if it's supposedly abandoned. She turned to the group. That's another clue. Follow the money, as they say. Who's benefiting from keeping this mansion in the public eye? The front door stood slightly ajar, creaking on its hinges. A faint light flickered from somewhere deep inside, casting dancing shadows through the mirrors. The interior smelled of old books, furniture polish, and something else, fresh coffee? Was someone actually here? Okay, gang, Fred said, pulling out his trusty map. Let's split up and search for clues. Velma and I will check the east wing for any financial records or documents. Daphne, you explore the main hall and look for anything unusual about these mirrors. Shaggy, Scooby. Let me guess. Shaggy interrupted, his voice climbing an octave. We get the basement, right? It's always the basement with us. Actually, Fred grinned. I was going to say kitchen. Maybe you'll find some clues about who's been here recently. Shaggy's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Kitchen? Did someone say kitchen? Come on, Scoob? Maybe there's some food in there we can, investigate thoroughly. The duo practically sprinted toward where they hoped the kitchen would be, their earlier fears temporarily forgotten at the prospect of snacks. As the gang separated, Velma called out one more piece of advice. Remember, everyone, if something seems too good to be true financially, it probably is. That's rule number 1 of avoiding scams. Keep your eyes open for anything that promises easy money or quick riches. That's usually where we'll find our villain's motive. The mansion seemed to swallow each member of the gang as they ventured into different directions. Mirrors reflected their movements, multiplying them into crowds. Somewhere in the depths of the building, a sound echoed. Was it laughter? The rattling of chains? Or perhaps the clicking of an old calculator? Fred and Velma climbed the grand staircase, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Portraits lined the walls, all of them showing Cornelius Goldworth at different ages, each painting featuring him holding different financial instruments: stocks, bonds, property deeds, gold bars. In every portrait, his eyes seemed to follow them. Fred, look at this, Velma whispered, stopping at a portrait dated 1995. The plaque says Cornelius Goldworth celebrates 1,000% returns. That's impossible through legitimate means in a single year. The average stock market return is about 10% annually over time. This confirms my suspicion something illegal was happening here. Suddenly, a bone-chilling laugh echoed through the hallway. The mirrors began to rattle, and in one of them, a ghostly figure appeared, translucent, wearing a Victorian suit covered in dollar signs, with eyes that glowed like gold coins. Who dares disturb the secrets of wealth? The figure boomed, his voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. Leave this place, or suffer the compound interest of your greed. Fred and Velma stumbled backward as the phantom investor's image appeared in mirror after mirror, surrounding them. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving only the echo of maniacal laughter and a single gold coin spinning on the floor. Velma picked up the coin with a handkerchief, examining it carefully. Fred, this isn't a real coin. It's a chocolate wrapped in gold foil. Someone's playing tricks, and they're using theatrics to scare people away. The question is, what are they protecting? Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Shaggy and Scooby had indeed found food, but not the kind they expected. The pantry was fully stocked with fresh groceries, and on the counter sat a ledger book, open to a page showing recent transactions. Expenses for groceries, utilities, and something called Mirror Maintenance Fund were all meticulously recorded. Like, Scoob, check this out, Shaggy said, temporarily distracted from the sandwiches he was making. Someone's living here and keeping detailed records of every penny they spend. That's some serious budgeting. Before Scooby could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. The two friends did what they did best, panicked. Shaggy grabbed the ledger, Scooby grabbed the sandwiches, and they both dove into a large cabinet, pulling the doors shut just as the footsteps entered the kitchen. Through a crack in the cabinet, they watched as a figure in a dark cloak entered, went straight to the refrigerator, and pulled out a calculator and another ledger. The figure began muttering, "Property taxes due next month. Need to increase the scare tactics? Tourists getting too curious. The secret must remain hidden until the investment matures." Shaggy's phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Fred asking for their location. The sound made the cloaked figure spin around. "Who's there?" the voice demanded. But Shaggy had accidentally hit send, and now Fred was responding with, "Meet us in the main hall in 5 minutes." The cloaked figure rushed out of the kitchen. Shaggy and Scooby tumbled out of the cabinet, clutching their evidence. Like, "Time to scoot, Scoob. We've got major clues here." They raced toward the main hall, where an even bigger surprise awaited them all. The main hall of Mirror Mansion was a cathedral of glass and light. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls of crystal, their light bouncing between dozens of mirrors positioned at precise angles. The effect was dizzying. Every direction showed infinite reflections, making it impossible to determine the room's true size or shape. Daphne stood in the center, her notebook filled with observations, trying to make sense of the optical illusion surrounding her. "This is brilliant architecture," she murmured, tracing the sightlines with her finger. "But it's also strategic. These mirrors could hide secret passages, conceal the number of people in a room, or make one person look like many. Whoever designed this knew exactly what they were doing." She approached one particularly large mirror and noticed something odd. The reflection showed the room behind her, but with slight differences. A vase that was on the left table in reality appeared on the right table in the reflection. Daphne pulled out her phone and took photos, comparing reality with reflection. "Got it," she whispered to herself. "This isn't a mirror. It's a window painted to look like a mirror. There's another room behind this glass." She pressed the ornate frame, and with a soft click, the mirror swung inward, revealing a hidden office. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls. A massive desk dominated the center, and papers were scattered everywhere. But what caught Daphne's attention was the wall covered with newspaper clippings, all about property fraud, investment scams, and Ponzi schemes that have been exposed over the past 20 years. In the center was a photo of Cornelius Goldworth with a red X drawn over his face. And below it, someone had written, "Never again." The gang reconvened in the main hall, each bringing their discoveries. Shaggy and Scooby burst in first, panting and clutching the ledger and half-eaten sandwiches. Guys, Shaggy wheezed. "Someone's totally living here and, keeping track of every penny they spend. Plus, they're planning to scare away tourists until some investment matures, whatever that means." Velma's eyes lit up as she examined the ledger. "This is excellent. Look at these entries. They're paying property taxes, maintenance, utilities, even insurance. This isn't abandoned at all. Someone's maintaining the appearance of abandonment while actually running this place like a business." Fred added his findings. "Velma and I found financial records hidden behind a portrait. Cornelius Goldworth was running what looks like a classic pyramid scheme. He promised investors huge returns by getting them to recruit other investors. The math literally doesn't work. You can't sustain those returns without the pyramid eventually collapsing." "Pyramid?" Scooby asked, tilting his head. Velma knelt down to Scooby's level. "Imagine if I gave you one Scooby snack and promised that if you got Shaggy to join, you get 2 snacks. Then if Shaggy got Fred to join, you both get 4 snacks. Sounds great, right? But eventually, you run out of new people to join, and the whole thing collapses. The only person who really makes money is the person at the top in this case, Cornelius. Rats rot rare," Scooby declared indignantly. "Exactly," Velma continued, standing up. "It's not fair, and it's illegal. It's called fraud. Real investing is about putting money into actual businesses or assets that create value over time. Retirement funds, index funds, real estate that you actually use or rent. These are legitimate ways to grow wealth slowly and steadily. Daphne waved them over to the secret office. You all need to see this. Whoever's here now, they were not trying to continue Goldworth as scam. They were trying to expose it or prevent it from happening again. As the gang examined the office, they noticed a pattern in the newspaper clippings. Each exposed scam had been traced back to people who'd invested in Cornelius's original scheme. Victims who'd lost their life savings, their homes, their retirement funds. Look at this article, Fred said, pulling one down. It's from 15 years ago. Local teacher loses everything in investment scam. The teacher's name is Margaret Worthington. And according to this, she's been trying to warn others about financial fraud ever since. A sound made them all freeze, footsteps echoing on the floor above them, but not regular footsteps. These were accompanied by a strange dragging sound, like chains being pulled across wooden floors. The secrets are not for the curious. The voice of the phantom investor boomed through the mansion. Those who seek the treasure of greed shall find only the poverty of regret. The mirrors began to shake violently. In each reflection, the phantom investor appeared, multiplied infinitely. The figure floated down the grand staircase, his ethereal form passing through banisters and walls, leaving trails of glowing dollar signs in his wake. His face was a skull with coin slot eyes, and his hands reached out toward them with fingers like calculator keys. Leave this place. The compound interest of your doom is calculating. Like, I've heard of interest rates, but that's ridiculous, Shaggy yelped, grabbing Scooby. The two tried to run, but slipped on something gold coins scattered across the floor. Except when Shaggy picked one up, it dissolved into glitter. Props! Velma exclaimed. Fred, Daphne, these are stage effects. Someone's using projection, carefully placed speakers, and theatrical supplies. This ghost is as fake as a $3 bill. But real or not, the effect was terrifying. The phantom investor's image grew larger, filling every mirror. The voice grew louder. You cannot escape the reflection of your greed. Every mirror shows your future bankruptcy, ruin, desperation. Suddenly, sections of the floor began to light up under blacklight, revealing hidden messages written in invisible ink. The real treasure is knowledge, and compound interest works both ways, in debt and in savings. And budget your time, budget your money, budget your life. This is weird, Daphne observed, even as they retreated from the advancing phantom. These messages aren't threatening their educational, financial advice? Fred's mind was already working on a plan. Gang, I think our ghost might actually be trying to teach people something. But we need to get to the bottom of this. Everyone back to the mystery machine. We need to research Margaret Worthington and figure out her connection to this mansion. As they fled toward the exit, Velma grabbed one more piece of evidence, a USB drive that had fallen from one of the filing cabinets. This might have the information we need. The phantom investor's laughter followed them out into the night. But as they reached the van, Scooby looked back and could have sworn he saw the ghostly figure standing in the window, not menacing, but watching, almost sadly. That's a rad roast, Scooby said quietly. Yeah, buddy, Shaggy agreed. Like, maybe the saddest ghost we've ever encountered. Back in the van, with doors locked and engine running, Velma plugged the USB drive into her laptop. What they found would change everything they thought they knew about the Mirror Mansion and its mysterious guardian. Inside the mystery machine, the gang huddled around Velma's laptop as files from the USB drive populated the screen. The blue glow illuminated their faces as Velma clicked through folders labeled Victims, Evidence, and Financial Education Initiative. This is incredible, Velma whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of sadness and admiration. Margaret Worthington isn't trying to protect a scam, she is trying to prevent one from ever happening again. The first folder contained heartbreaking testimonies. Video interviews with people, elderly couples, young families, single parents, all explaining how they'd invested their life savings with Cornelius Goldworth, believing his promises of 50%, 100%, even 1,000% returns. One elderly man explained through tears how he lost the money he saved for his granddaughter as college fund. A woman in her 50s described losing her home. Cornelius would have these lavish parties, one victim explained in a video. He'd show us his mansion, his cars, his jewelry. He'd say, "This could be yours too. Just invest with me and recruit your friends." He made it sound so easy. We didn't understand terms like Ponzi scheme or pyramid structure. We just saw someone successful offering to help us. Daphne's eyes glistened with tears. These people worked their whole lives, saved carefully, and then lost everything because someone they trusted betrayed them. That's not just theft. It's stealing people's futures, their dreams, their security. Fred clenched his fists. Where was Goldworth when his scheme collapsed? What happened to him? Velma clicked to another folder. According to these documents, when the scheme collapsed 20 years ago, Cornelius disappeared. He'd already moved most of the money offshore to accounts that couldn't be traced. He'd left behind only this mansion and a mountain of debt. The property should have been sold to repay victims, but there was a legal loophole. The mansion was in a trust with complex ownership structures. And let me guess, Shaggy said, munching on a bag of chips he'd found under the seat, like Margaret Worthington figured out a way to get control of it. Exactly, Velma exclaimed. She became a certified financial educator after losing her savings. She wrote books about avoiding scams, taught classes at community centers, and spent 15 years tracking down every penny of Goldworth's empire. 3 years ago, she finally gained legal ownership of Mirror Mansion through a lawsuit. But instead of selling it for profit, she turned it into something else. The files revealed Margaret's plan. Transform Mirror Mansion into a living museum and educational center about financial literacy. The mirrors weren't just decorations, they were metaphors. See yourself reflected in these victims. One proposal document read, "See how easily greed and false promises can trap anyone. Learn to reflect on your financial decisions before making them." So the phantom investor ... Fred began. Is Margaret's creation, Velma finished. She's using the legend of the haunted mansion to attract attention, scare away treasure hunters and scammers who think Goldworth hid money here. And eventually, once she has enough funding and public interest, reveal the truth and open it as an educational center. "That's wonderful," Scooby exclaimed. "It would be wonderful," a voice said from outside the van, "if meddling kids weren't about to ruin everything." The gang jumped as a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman in her 60s with silver hair, wearing practical clothes and carrying a laptop bag. But her eyes were kind, not threatening. "Margaret Worthington?" Velma asked, rolling down the window. "The one and only," Margaret replied with a tired smile. "I suppose you figured it all out. I'm sorry for scaring you, but I couldn't risk anyone discovering the plan before it was ready. The mansion's value has been increasing because I've been generating publicity. Every ghost story, every mysterious rumor, every failed purchase attempt creates buzz. When I finally reveal the truth and open the doors as a financial literacy center, the attention will be massive. That's the real reflection investment, turning tragedy into education." Daphne smiled warmly. "Ms. Worthington, that's actually brilliant marketing. You're using the mystery to create value." "But," Fred interjected, "you're also breaking the law. Trespassing laws. Probably some fraud statutes for the fake ghost ... Margaret sighed. "I know. But after what Goldworth did, after watching my fellow victims struggle for decades, watching people continue to fall for similar scams because they don't understand basic economics, I decided the risk was worth it. If I go to jail, but this center helps even 100 people avoid financial scams, I'll consider it a success. Suddenly, the sound of vehicles approaching made everyone turn. 3 black SUVs pulled up, and men in dark suits emerged. For a moment, it looked like law enforcement, but the logo on their vehicles read, Goldworth Investment Trust. "No," Margaret gasped. "It can't be." The lead man stepped forward, a cruel smile on his face. "Miss Worthington, I'm afraid this property belongs to the Goldworth Investment Trust. You see, Cornelius Goldworth didn't die. He's been waiting offshore, accumulating wealth through legitimate investments this time, waiting for the heat to die down. And now, he wants his mansion back." "That's impossible," Velma shouted. "The legal proceedings clearly were based on him being missing, presumed dead," the man interrupted. "But he's very much alive, and he has lawyers better than yours. By tomorrow morning, this property will be back in his name, and your little education project will be demolished to build luxury condos. The highest and best use of property, wouldn't you say?" Fred stepped forward protectively. "And who are you?" "Douglas Goldworth, Cornelius's son. And unlike you children, I understand that sentiment doesn't pay the bills. This property is worth millions. Why waste it on teaching poor people about money they'll never have?" The gang exchanged looks. This wasn't just about solving a mystery anymore. This was about justice. And they had one night to save Margaret Estream and ensure the victims of Cornelius Goldworth finally got something resembling compensation. "Gand," Fred said quietly, "I think it's time we set a trap. But this one isn't for a ghost. It's for a very real villain." Velma's mind was already racing. "I have an idea. But we'll need to work fast, use every skill we have, and probably bend a few rules ourselves." Shaggy and Scooby looked at each other nervously. "Like, this is going to be dangerous, isn't it?" Shaggy asked. "Rhea, Ranger Rouse," Scooby agreed. But both stood firm. Some mysteries were bigger than their fears. The clock on the Mystery Machine's dashboard read 9:47 p.m. They had less than 12 hours before. Douglas Goldworth's lawyers filed papers at the courthouse, and once those documents were stamped, Margaret's ownership and her dream would evaporate like morning fog. Fred spread architectural plans of Mirror Mansion across the van's floor, using his leadership skills to delegate tasks. "Okay, team, here's the plan. Douglas and his father want this property for its value, but they're also hiding something. Velma, you said legitimate investors don't run away and hide for 20 years. What's Cornelius really afraid of?" Velma adjusted her glasses, her analytical mind working through possibilities. The statute of limitations on fraud varies, but more importantly, civil suits from victims could still be filed if he's found. He's been in hiding, not because the criminal charges are still active, but because showing his face means dozens of lawsuits that could drain even his offshore accounts. Douglas is his proxy, the face Cornelius can't show. "So we need evidence," Daphne said, pulling out her phone and starting to research. "Something that proves Cornelius is actively directing Douglas, which would give Margaret legal grounds to challenge the ownership transfer. It's called fraud upon the court if they're hiding his involvement." "Like, that sounds super complicated and legal," Shaggy commented, feeding Scooby a Scooby snack. "What's our part?" "And please say it involves staying somewhere safe and warm." Fred grinned. "Actually, you two have the most important role. You're going to help Margaret stage the most elaborate phantom investor appearance yet. We need to lure Douglas and ideally Cornelius himself into the mansion tonight, get them talking, and record their conversation admitting to fraud." Margaret, who'd been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but these are dangerous men. Cornelius destroyed lives without remorse. I can't ask children to." "Miss Worthington," Velma interrupted gently, "we've faced down dozens of villains who pretended to be ghosts, monsters, and ghouls. But you You're the first real hero we've met in a long time. Someone who turned personal tragedy into a mission to help others. We're not going to let greedy people destroy that." The plan came together quickly. Daphne would use her social media skills to create a viral post about ghostly activity at Mirror Mansion tonight, live footage coming. That would draw attention and serve as insurance. Whatever happened would have witnesses. Velma would hack into the mansion's electrical system that Margaret had modernized, allowing them to control lights, sounds, and the projection equipment Margaret had installed for her ghost effects. Fred would set up the actual trap, not a net or cage, but something more sophisticated. Hidden cameras and microphones throughout the mansion, recording every word. The evidence would be streamed live to cloud storage that even destroying equipment couldn't erase. And Shaggy and Scooby? They'd be the bait, along with Margaret playing her phantom investor role to its fullest. The goal was to make Douglas believe the mansion held actual hidden treasure from his father's scheme, something worth so much that he'd call Cornelius directly and bring him out of hiding. "But what treasure?" Margaret asked. "There is none. Cornelius spent or hid it all." Velma smiled mysteriously. "There doesn't need to be real treasure. We just need them to believe there is. And I know exactly what will convince them." From her backpack, Velma pulled out a replica of an old ledger she'd been working on, using the real financial data from the USB drive, but formatted to look like a secret account book. "This will show account numbers, offshore bank locations, and access codes. We'll make Douglas find it, photograph it, and send it to his father. Greedy people can't resist the appearance of easy money. That's so risky," Margaret worried. "If they actually get access to anyone's real accounts." "They won't," Velma assured her. "The accounts don't exist, and even if someone tried to use these codes, they'd trigger alerts at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I've been working with them on a project about identifying fake financial documents. These codes are honeypots traps for scammers." The gang sprang into action. Daphne's post went viral within minutes. Her followers loved mystery content, and soon thousands of people were commenting, sharing, and planning to watch the promised live stream. Local news stations picked up the story. By 10:30 p.m., Mirror Mansion was trending online. Fred and Velma worked inside the mansion, setting up equipment. Margaret showed them all the secret passages she'd discovered, the projection points, the speaker locations. "I've spent 3 years learning every inch of this place," she explained. "Cornelius built hidden rooms throughout, probably to hide evidence or meet with inner circle investors away from the main groups." In the kitchen, Shaggy and Scooby prepared their props, fake treasure chests filled with costume jewelry and chocolate coins, mysterious maps drawn on aged paper, and plenty of atmospheric touches. But they also prepared something else: sandwiches. Lots of sandwiches. "Like Scoob, if we're going to be bait, at least we'll be well-fed bait," Shaggy reasoned. "Rhea, rel red," Scooby agreed, stacking cold cuts high. At 11:15 p.m., Douglas's SUVs returned, but this time with more people: his lawyers, security guards, and a suspicious van with tinted windows. The gang watched from hidden positions as Douglas strode toward the mansion, speaking into a phone. "Yes, Father, I'm here. The social media activity is concerning someone's inside making claims about treasure. If any of the victims figure out where you really hid the bulk of the funds, ... Yes, I understand. I'll verify what's here and call you back," Velma whispered into her radio to the team. Did everyone hear that? He just admitted Cornelius hid funds that victims don't know about. That's evidence. The trap was set. As Douglas and his entourage entered Mirror Mansion, the phantom investor was ready to make his most spectacular appearance yet. The mirrors reflected everyone's movements, multiplying them into armies. Margaret, in full costume, waited in the secret control room Fred and Velma had set up. "Fred," she whispered into her mic, "I just want to say thank you. Regardless of how this ends, You kids have given me hope that good people still exist. Miss Worthington, Fred replied, thank you for teaching us that real wealth isn't money. It is the positive impact you have on the world. Now let's show these crooks that there are some investments that aren't for sale. In the shadows, Scooby whispered to Shaggy, Raggy, I'm rared. Me too, buddy. But we're doing the right thing. And you know what? Sometimes doing the right thing is scarier than any ghost, because it actually matters. The clock struck midnight. The hunt was on. And somewhere in the mansion, Douglas Goldworth was about to discover that the scariest thing in Mirror Mansion wasn't a phantom, it was the truth. Douglas Goldworth moved through Mirror Mansion with false confidence, his security team flanking him. The lawyers stayed near the entrance, not wanting to get their expensive shoes dirty. But Douglas pressed forward, flashlight cutting through the darkness, greed overriding caution. There's nothing here but theatrical garbage, he muttered, kicking aside one of Margaret's props. Some teacher playing ghost isn't going to. His words cut off as every mirror in the main hall suddenly illuminated. Not from flashlights or regular lights, but from within, glowing with an eerie green luminescence. Velma's expert electrical work had transformed the mansion into a supernatural light show. Who disturbs the reflection of justice? Margaret's altered voice boomed through the speakers, distorted to sound otherworldly. Her phantom investor appeared in every mirror, towering over the intruders. The sins of the father compound onto the son. Douglas's security team stumbled backward, but Douglas himself laughed. Nice try. I know this is all. The floor beneath him suddenly gave way one of Fred's classic trap mechanisms. But instead of a net, Douglas fell into a slide that sent him tumbling into a hidden basement room. The room Margaret had prepared specifically for this moment. What the? Douglas scrambled to his feet, finding himself in a circular room lined entirely with mirrors. But these mirrors didn't show his reflection. Instead, they showed videos testimonies from victims of his father's scheme. The elderly man who lost his granddaughter's college fund. The woman who lost her home. Dozens of faces, dozens of stories, all playing simultaneously. These people, Margaret's voice came through speakers, invested with your father. They trusted him. And he destroyed their lives for profit. The real haunting of this mansion isn't a ghost, Douglas. It's the echo of all that suffering. Douglas's face contorted with anger. But then he saw it in the center of the room, on a pedestal illuminated by a single spotlight, sat Velma's fake ledger. He rushed forward, grabbed it, began photographing pages with shaking hands. Yes, he hissed into his phone. Father, I found it. Your offshore accounts, the real books. It's all here. He didn't notice the tiny camera lens hidden in the ceiling, recording everything. He didn't hear the click as his call was traced and recorded. Upstairs, Shaggy and Scooby were handling their own crisis. 3 of Douglas's security guards had split off, searching for the source of the ghost effects. The duo ran through corridors, the guards chasing them in a classic Scooby-Doo chase sequence in and out of doors through secret passages, even at one point running across the ceiling through the reflection in the mirrors, achieved by Fred's cleverly angled mirror trick that made it look like they were defying gravity. Like Scoob, this way, Shaggy yelled, sliding around a corner. They burst into one of the rooms filled with Margaret's financial education materials, posters about compound interest, budgeting worksheets, warnings about pyramid schemes. Scooby's paw hit a switch, and suddenly a projector activated, displaying a massive presentation, the real cost of debt. Graphs showed how credit card interest compounds, how payday loans trap people in cycles of poverty, how predatory lending targets vulnerable communities. The security guards skidded to a halt, momentarily distracted by the information. One of them muttered, I didn't know my credit card interest was calculated daily ... double quotes. Focus. Another guard snapped, Get those kids. But Shaggy had already spotted their escape, a laundry chute that Margaret had mentioned. Cannonball. he yelled, diving in with Scooby right behind. They slid down through darkness, screaming all the way, and landed in a pile of old curtains in the basement, right next to the room where Douglas was trapped. Meanwhile, Daphne was executing her part of the plan perfectly. Outside the mansion, the live stream was broadcasting everything carefully edited to show the ghost activity without revealing the gang's trap. Thousands of viewers were watching, commenting, sharing. News vans were arriving. Police had been called due to the commotion. But Daphne noticed something that made her blood run cold. The suspicious van with tinted windows, it had moved. And now its back doors were open. Someone else was here. Someone who'd been waiting. Inside, Fred and Velma monitored everything from their control room. We've got Douglas on tape, admitting he's working with his father, admitting the offshore accounts exist, and admitting they're hiding money from victims, Velma said, checking her recordings. That's enough for law enforcement to reopen investigations. But we need Cornelius himself, Fred replied. Douglas could claim he was lying to impress his father, that he was confused. We need what? A cold voice said behind them. Fred and Velma spun around to find themselves face to face with an elderly man in an expensive suit, silver hair, cold eyes, and a smile that held no warmth. Behind him stood two large bodyguards. Cornelius Goldworth, Velma breathed. The very same, he replied, stepping into the room and examining their equipment with mild interest. Very impressive setup. That teacher woman has more technical skill than I gave her credit for. But you children made one critical error. You forgot that a good investor always does reconnaissance before committing resources. He pointed to a small device on his lapel. Signal jammer. Your recordings aren't uploading anywhere. And my son may be impulsive, but I taught him to always have a backup plan. He pressed a button on his phone. Douglas, I'm in the control room. Bring everyone here. It's time to clean up this mess. Fred moved to stand protectively in front of Velma. You won't get away with this. There are thousands of people watching online. News crews outside. Watching a ghost story, Cornelius interrupted smoothly. A bunch of kids playing pranks in an old mansion. By tomorrow, this will be a funny anecdote. The kids who thought they could outwit Cornelius Goldworth with parlor tricks. His smile widened, predatory. I've evaded the FBI, international law enforcement, and the best legal minds in the country for 20 years. Did you really think some teenagers and a washed-up victim could stop me? But Velma smiled back, which confused Cornelius. Mr. Goldworth, did you know that the average American household could save over $500 a month just by tracking expenses and cutting unnecessary spending? Or that investing just $200 monthly from age 25 to 65 in a simple index fund averaging 7% returns would yield over $500,000? What are you babbling about? Cornelius snapped. Financial literacy, Velma continued, her voice growing stronger. Margaret Worthington spent 20 years learning it, teaching it, spreading it. She turned her tragedy into education. She took her losses and multiplied them into lessons for thousands of people. That's compound interest too, but instead of money, it's knowledge, wisdom, and positive impact. And you can't steal that. I can steal this mansion, bulldoze this ridiculous education project, and you'll still be a failure. Margaret's voice came through the speakers. She'd activated the system remotely when she saw Cornelius enter. Cornelius, I was there at your parties. I saw you show off your wealth, your success. But you know what I've learned? Real wealth isn't about having more than others. It's about having enough. And you'll never have enough, because people like you confuse net worth with self-worth. Douglas and his guards arrived with Shaggy and Scooby in tow. The gang was reunited, but surrounded. Cornelius's expression had turned thunderous. Enough philosophy, he snarled. You're all trespassing. My lawyers will have you arrested, and I'll sue you for everything you have. Row, Scooby whimpered. But Shaggy squared his shoulders. Like, dude, we don't have much. I've got maybe $47 in my bank account and a collection of sandwich recipes. Scoob's got his Scooby snacks. But you know what we do have? We have friends. We have each other. And we have something you younger understand. We know the difference between the price of things and the value of things. Well said, Shaggy. Daphne's voice crackled over the radio. And Cornelius, you made a critical error. You forgot that I've been streaming this entire conversation to a private channel, one that goes directly to the FBI field office. Agent Morrison says hello, by the way. She's been building a case against you for 5 years, and you just confessed to everything on federal recording equipment. The color drained from Cornelius' face. The signal jammer had blocked their local uploads, but it couldn't block Daphne's dedicated law enforcement channel that used different frequencies. The sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flickered through the mirrors, multiplying into thousands of dancing colors. The FBI had arrived, along with local police, and even IRS agents interested in those offshore accounts Douglas had so helpfully photographed. Cornelius made a run for it, but Fred was ready. He pulled a cord, and one of his classic net traps deployed, but this one was special. It was made from the financial statements of all of Cornelius's victims, photocopied and woven together. As Cornelius struggled, he was literally wrapped in the evidence of his crimes. How's that for poetic justice? Fred said. Douglas tried to escape through a window, but Scooby-Doo, in a moment of bravery, launched himself through the air, aided by a well-placed trampoline Fred had positioned earlier, and tackled him. The two tumbled across the floor, and when they stopped, Scooby was sitting proudly on Douglas's chest. Scooby-Dooby-Doo! He howled triumphantly. Within minutes, FBI agents swarmed the mansion. Agent Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, personally placed handcuffs on Cornelius. Mr. Goldworth, you're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and about 40 other charges. And thanks to our young friends here, we have everything we need for a conviction. As they led Cornelius out, he looked at Margaret with pure hatred. You've accomplished nothing. You'll never recover what you lost. Margaret smiled serenely. I already have recovered, Cornelius. I lost money, yes, but I gained purpose. I gained knowledge. I gained the ability to help others avoid what happened to me. You can't put a price on that, which is exactly why you'll never understand it. The FBI also confiscated Douglas's phone, which had the photographs of the fake ledger. Agent Morrison laughed when she saw them. Nice work, she told Velma. These account numbers are flagged in our system. If he'd tried to access any of them, we'd have known immediately. Smart thinking. As dawn broke over Mirror Mansion, the gang sat on the front steps with Margaret, watching the last of the law enforcement vehicles drive away. Daphne's live stream had ended with the message, mystery solved, justice served. Financial literacy saves the day. So what happens now? Fred asked Margaret. Margaret took a deep breath of morning air. Now? Now we open Mirror Mansion Educational Center for real. The FBI says Cornelius's seized assets will be distributed to victims, including me. I'll use my portion to fund the center properly. We'll have exhibits about financial scams, classes on budgeting and investing, workshops for families and students. We'll teach people that true wealth comes from knowledge, discipline, and making informed decisions. Velma beamed. That's the best possible outcome. And, Margaret added with a twinkle in her eye, I'll need some consultants. 5 young people who understand both mystery solving and the importance of financial education. The pay isn't much, but you'd be helping change lives. We're in, the gang said in unison. Shaggy raised his hand. Just one question. Does the job come with snacks? Margaret laughed, really laughed, freely and joyfully, perhaps for the first time in 20 years. All the snacks you can eat. And Scooby-Doo, I'll make sure there's a lifetime supply of Scooby snacks. Scooby-Dooby-Doo. Scooby cheered. As the sun rose fully, its light caught the mirrors of the mansion, transforming it from a spooky haunted house into a beacon of reflected brilliance, a monument not to greed, but to the power of turning tragedy into triumph, loss into learning, and suffering into service. 3 months had passed since that dramatic night at Mirror Mansion. The gang returned for the grand opening of the Mirror Mansion Financial Literacy Center, and the transformation was remarkable. Where once stood a monument to greed, now stood a vibrant educational facility buzzing with life and purpose. The main hall, still lined with mirrors, now featured interactive exhibits. Each mirror showed not just reflections, but projections animated lessons about compound interest, the difference between assets and liabilities, how credit scores work, and the basics of investing. Children laughed as they played games that taught budgeting. Teenagers clustered around simulators that let them practice making financial decisions without real-world consequences. Margaret stood at the entrance, greeting visitors with genuine warmth. She'd aged backward, it seemed, the stress and anger that had lined her face replaced with contentment and purpose. She wore a name tag that read, Margaret Worthington, Executive Director and Chief Financial Educator. You came, she exclaimed, hugging each member of the gang. I couldn't have done this without you. Come, let me show you what we've accomplished. The tour was inspiring. In what used to be Cornelius's master bedroom, there was now a classroom teaching the truth about credit cards, how they work, how interest compounds, how to use them responsibly. In the dining room where he once hosted parties promising impossible returns, workshops on identifying financial scams help people spot red flags, promises of guaranteed high returns, pressure to recruit others, emphasis on secrecy. We've had over 5,000 visitors in 3 months, Margaret explained proudly. We've taught classes to high school students, college kids, young families, and retirees. We offer everything free of charge, funded by the settlement from Cornelius's seized assets. Daphne was filming everything for her social media, but this time it wasn't about mystery, it was about education. Her followers had embraced the financial literacy content, and she even started a series called Money Mysteries Solved that broke down complex financial concepts into simple, engaging videos. The engagement has been incredible, Daphne told Margaret. People are hungry for this information, but it's usually presented in boring or intimidating ways. Making it accessible and fun, that's revolutionary. In the library, Velma discovered Margaret had created a research center with databases of known scams, financial crime patterns, and consumer protection resources. This is incredible, Ms. Worthington. This is doctoral-level research organization. Well, Margaret smiled. I had 20 years to think about how I'd do this if I ever got the chance. And I had excellent partners. She gestured to plaques on the wall. Honorary Financial Education. Consultants. Fred Jones, Daphne Blake, Velma Dinkley, Norval Shaggy Rogers, and Scooby-Doo. Rook, that's me. Scooby barked excitedly, pointing at his name. They found Fred in what had been the secret office, now converted into a strategy room where Margaret worked with law enforcement and consumer protection agencies to identify and stop new financial scams before they could hurt people. Fred was studying a caseboard covered with strings connecting various pieces of information. It's like mystery solving, he explained. But instead of finding out who's pretending to be a ghost, we're finding out who's pretending to offer legitimate investments. The skills totally transfer. Shaggy and Scooby have discovered the center is Crown Jewel, a fully functional teaching kitchen where cooking classes doubled as lessons in budgeting, meal planning, and the economics of food waste. The instructor, a cheerful woman named Rosa, was teaching families how to prepare nutritious meals on limited budgets. Like, this is amazing, Shaggy said, sampling a dish. You can eat well and save money? That's like my two favorite things combined. Rhea, relicious, Rand economical. Scooby agreed, his tail wagging. As the afternoon sun streamed through the mirrors, creating rainbows throughout the mansion, Margaret gathered the gang in the main hall for a special ceremony. Media had been invited, local news, some national outlets, even financial education organizations. Today, Margaret announced to the assembled crowd, "We're launching a new program called Reflect Forward. Thanks to additional funding from recovered assets and private donors who believe in our mission, we're taking this educational model nationwide. We'll help other communities create their own financial literacy centers, train educators, and develop curricula for schools." She turned to the gang. "And I'm honored to announce our first 5 junior ambassadors for the program. These young people who reminded me that age doesn't tempt. Determine the ability to make a difference, only the willingness to try." The crowd applauded as each member of the gang received a certificate and a special mirror with an inscription. "Reflect on the past, learn from it, but always face forward." Velma stepped up to give a brief speech. "When we first came to Mirror Mansion, we thought we were just solving another mystery. But we learned something more important than who was behind the ghost costume. We learned that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or property values. It's measured in the positive impact we have on others' lives." She paused, looking at the crowd. "Every person here today will learn something about managing money, maybe how to budget, or how to avoid scams, or how to invest for the future. And you'll take that knowledge and share it with family, friends, neighbors. That knowledge will compound, just like interest, spreading exponentially. That's the real treasure of Mirror Mansion, not gold or jewels, but wisdom that grows when shared." The crowd's applause was thunderous. Daphne spoke next about the power of using modern platforms for education. Fred discussed how planning and strategy apply to both mystery solving and financial planning. Shaggy surprised everyone with an eloquent, if slightly rambling speech about how even small savings add up over time. Like, "Dude, if I'd saved just $1 every time Scoob and I ran from a ghost, we'd probably have like thousands by now." Finally, Scooby bounded to the microphone. "Riopal Roskmi. Scooby. Ro du ro ranage roni. Ran I ray ... carefully. Rave Rome, Rinvest Rome, Ran Rawways Reap Emergency, Scooby Racks." The crowd laughed, but the wisdom was sound: save some, invest some, and always have an emergency fund. As the ceremony concluded and visitors explored the exhibits, Agent Morrison approached the gang. "I wanted to give you an update. Cornelius Goldworth was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Douglas got 15. But more importantly, we've recovered over $40 million in hidden assets. After legal fees and government fines, approximately $25 million will be distributed to victims." "Will it be enough to make them whole?" Fred asked. "For most, no," Morrison admitted. "Money lost 20 years ago would have grown with investment. The emotional toll can't be repaid, but it's something. And combined with this center teaching people how to avoid falling for similar schemes in the future, that's the best justice we can achieve." As evening approached and visitors began to leave, the gang sat with Margaret in the now peaceful main hall, surrounded by mirrors that no longer reflected greed and deception, but hope and education. "I have something for each of you," Margaret said, handing out envelopes. Inside were savings bonds, not valuable immediately, but designed to grow over time with compound interest. "These mature in 20 years," Margaret explained. "When you're adults with careers and families, these will be worth substantial amounts. But more than the money, they're reminders. Reminders that wealth builds slowly, through patience and wise decisions. Reminders that the best investments are the ones you make in knowledge, in relationships, and in making the world better than you found it." Velma hugged her envelope. "We'll treasure these, not for their monetary value, but for what they represent." And speaking of treasure, Fred added with a grin, We never did find out if Cornelius actually hid any money in this mansion. Was there ever real treasure here? Margaret's eyes twinkled mysteriously. Well, that depends on your definition of treasure. The real wealth here was always the property itself and the opportunity it represented. But she walked to a specific mirror and pressed a hidden button. A section of wall slid open, revealing a small safe. The gang gasped. Inside wasn't money, but something else, dozens of letters, carefully preserved. Margaret pulled one out and read aloud. Dear future owner, if you're reading this, you've either bought this mansion or, more likely, I'm finally dead or caught. I, Cornelius Goldworth, built my fortune on the greed and gullibility of others. I told myself I deserved this mansion, this wealth, because I was smarter than everyone else. But late at night, alone in this house, I realized the truth. I am the poorest man alive because I have no genuine relationships, no peace, no purpose beyond accumulation. If you're here, please don't repeat my mistakes. True wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in the lives you touch positively. I wish I'd learned that sooner. The letter was dated 2 years before Cornelius disappeared, signed and notarized. He knew, Daphne whispered. Deep down, he knew what he was doing was wrong. Knowledge without action is meaningless, Margaret said softly. He knew but chose greed anyway. That's the saddest part. Which is why education must come with ethical frameworks. Knowing how to make money is useless if you don't also know why to make it responsibly and what to do with it once you have it. Shaggy stood up, stretching. Well, I don't know about you guys, but all this talk about compound interest is making me hungry. How about we compound some sandwiches? Maybe with double cheese that compounds into triple cheese? Rhea, rompound ramwiches. Scooby agreed enthusiastically. Everyone laughed, the tension of the heavy moment breaking. As they headed to the teaching kitchen to raid the refrigerator, which Rosa had good-naturedly told them they were welcome to do, Margaret called after them. One more thing. She pointed to a new sign being installed over the mansion's main entrance. It read, Mirror Mansion Financial Literacy Center, where everyone can see themselves succeeding, founded by Margaret Worthington in memory of all victims of financial fraud with special thanks to Mystery Inc. Below it, carved in elegant script, was a quote. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. The same is true for financial education. As the gang piled into the mystery machine to head home, stomachs full of compound sandwiches and hearts full of accomplishment, Velma summarized what they'd all learned. This mystery taught us that some monsters are real greed, fraud, and the willingness to hurt others for personal gain. But it also taught us that heroism is real too. Margaret could have stayed bitter, could have sought revenge, could have given up. Instead, she turned her pain into purpose. That's not just solving a mystery, that's creating a legacy. Fred started the engine, and we helped. Not with nets and traps, but with planning, teamwork, and using our individual skills for something meaningful. Daphne checked her phone, smiling at the flood of positive messages about her coverage of the center's opening. We also learned that mysteries aren't always about unmasking villains. Sometimes they're about uncovering potential in people, in properties, and in ourselves. Shaggy leaned back contentedly. I learned that, being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared but doing the right thing anyway. Also, that cooking classes are awesome. Rand I learned. Scooby added thoughtfully. Rat Revan Scooby Rax rate redder when ro rare rem. Everyone laughed. As the mystery machine drove away from Mirror Mansion, the setting sun caught the mirrors one last time, sending beams of light across the landscape, a beacon of hope, education, and second chances. In the distance, they could hear the sound of Margaret teaching an evening class, a voice carrying through open windows. Remember, compound interest is called the eighth wonder of the world for a reason. Einstein supposedly said those who understand it earn it. Those who don't, pay it. But I'd add those who teach it, change the world. Scooby-Dooby-Doo. Scooby howled into the evening air, and the mystery machine disappeared down the road toward their next adventure, carrying with them not just memories of another mystery solved, but lessons about true wealth that would last a lifetime.